Well, it looks like that's it. The Ministry of Defense of Russia wants to officially shut down the offensive in the east, and they said, Wagner, we don't care anymore, do whatever you want. At the same time, Russians started doing a mass evacuation from the south, and we might potentially see another big goodwill gesture in the south of Ukraine in the near future. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and see some more ridiculous Russian propaganda. And long story short, in this first video we see a guy in the traffic jam, obviously Russian driving this rustic car with the tank turret on his roof. And I mean the combination of a tank turret on the rustic vehicle. It's not much better than the actual Russian military vehicles, but for some reason he decided to show his support in this way. Which kinda looks hilarious, taking into consideration that instead of a soldier, there is a mannequin. He's also bringing this howitzer along with him, probably after the victory parade was over. And by the way, thank you every single one of you who joined for my livestream for the victory parade, and if you missed it, don't worry, the recording is already supposed to be on my channel. Speaking about some more ridiculous Russian news, recently it looks like that Russians started mobilization activities in temporarily occupied Mariupol. And I mean, just imagine if you are a Ukrainian living in this city, which was previously captured by the invaders. They claim that now you are Russian and now we will mobilize you so you can protect us, the invaders, from your fellow citizens. How ridiculously stupid it is. No wonder that a lot of Russian people decided to leave the country after the invasion has started, and just according to the most rough estimations, approximately 1.2 million Russians left the country in 2022 alone, and just for comparison reasons, from 1989 all the way until 2002, which is 13 years, an estimation of 1.6 million Russians left the country. And this is the comparison between 13 years and only 1 year. So, what do you think, guys? Was it worth it for Putin to justify his invasion with his delusional dreams and as a result destroy the future of his own country? In one way or another, sooner or later, Russia will lose this war, and the consequences for Putin will be severe. And that is exactly why he's doing everything possible right now to pretty much delay the inevitable. But at some point, he will have to be held responsible for his actions. And if you don't want to miss the collapse of Putin's regime, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel? You can also check my second channel, The Russian Dude Clips, where I post under 1-minute summaries every single day. The link is down below. And now let's very quickly talk about the Western support to Ukraine, and then we'll talk about Russians suspending their offensive in the east and ordering mass evacuations from the south. And first of all, according to the representative of Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ignat, for the very first time, they're able to intercept a ballistic Russian missile called Kinzhal using Patriot air defense system, which only once again confirms how incredibly amazing and necessary these systems were for Ukrainians. And just in general, speaking about the interceptions, in the last day alone, Ukrainians were able to intercept 35 out of 36 Shahed drones that Russia launched. And then right here is the picture of an Israeli tactical radar, i.e. MHR, which Ukraine received 3 of them, and Israel pledged a total of 16 of them. And the good thing about this radar is that it will be notifying Ukrainians about the upcoming Russian missiles way sooner than it is right now. Next we have the country of Poland, which already delivered 10 of its MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. And while Ukraine continues to receive the most recent military equipment, Russia just tries to uncover its museum exhibitions. And for example, recently T-55s, which were employed in the Russian military back in 1948, were spotted somewhere on the front lines. And in confirmation of this, we even have the satellite images, somewhere from the far eastern regions in Russia, where you can see that the big portion of such tanks were actually taken from the military bases and sent into Ukraine. And well, those remaining relatively modern tanks that Russia still has on Ukrainian front lines, they decided to install these metallic roofs, and they say that this will prevent Javelin missiles from destroying these tanks. I have no idea how this barbecue setup will help against Javelin, but this is what Russians claim. And as always, the full versions as well as additional photos and videos of these combat machines will be available on my Patreon. The link is down below. And now, as promised, let's talk about the situation in the east of Ukraine and why Russians want to suspend the offensive operations there. And then we'll talk about a similar situation in the south and why Russians decided to order a mass evacuation. But first of all, right here we have a video from the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, and as you can see, as a result of another Russian attack, a civilian building has been severely damaged. And well, it looks like that there was some kind of response in Belgorod, because there was some loud noises in the city, but the consequences, as you can see right here, are not even close to those in Kiev. And then later that day, the locals were able to see missiles launched from Belgorod, most likely going towards Kharkiv. Then we go more to the east of Ukraine, and according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians attempted to do some offensive operations next to Kupiansk and to the south of Crimea, with as always no results at all. At the same time, Ukrainians were able to successfully destroy a large mortar firing position of Russians in Ploshanka. Then we go to the hottest spot in the entire Ukraine, the city of Bakhmut, and as you can see from this video, there is some kind of combat activities which are happening inside the city, tactical relocation of forces. And speaking about Bakhmut, the most significant event of the last several days is that Wagner announced its total retreat from this city before May 10th. You might have heard about this already, but there are some additional details, such as for example that the soldiers of Ramzan Kadyrov, his Ahmad battalion, long story short, TikTokers, they said that they will replace Wagner in Bakhmut. And in response to that, the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said, yes, take our places. We will operate in Bakhmut all the way until midnight, May 10th, and then it is all yours. But then, apparently, the Ministry of Defense of Russia looks like they heard the pledge of Prigozhin for more weapons, and so they decided to send some more munitions to Wagner in Bakhmut, just because they realized that Wagner is pretty much the only successful military unit of Russia in Ukraine. It is still uncertain whether Wagner withdraws from Bakhmut or not. Maybe they will do it a little bit later, because the problem is not just with the lack of equipment. It is also massive losses of soldiers, combined with insignificance of this city, logistically speaking. And reportedly, even though the Ministry of Defense of Russia they decided to send the weapons to Wagner, they kinda prioritizing right now to suspend the offensive across the entire east and prepare for defenses in the light of an upcoming total Ukrainian counteroffensive. For this reason, the ministry also told Prigozhin that right now you have the free will of do whatever you want in Bakhmut, we are preparing for defenses, you do whatever you want, hopefully you succeed, but right now every man is for himself. Which kinda puts Prigozhin in very questionable position, because Russians will be expectedly defending themselves, while Wagner will try to advance in Bakhmut, so right now they will receive even less support from the conventional Russian forces. And what I personally think is happening is that Prigozhin wants to capture fully Bakhmut, to report it personally to Putin, in order to increase his ambitious chances of having to seize the power in Russia. But since right now advancing inside the city will be even harder than ever, most likely in case Wagner fails there will be a complete and total destruction of this private military company. Let's wait and see how the situation around Bakhmut develops in the next couple of weeks and months, because I do think that this can be a major turning point in the near future. But as for now, let me just give you a couple more words from the east, and then we'll talk about the similar brief update from the south of Ukraine. And first of all, according to Ukrainian sources, they were able to destroy a large mortar firing position of Russians in Novobakhmutivka. Going more to the south, Ukrainians reportedly were also able to destroy an assault group of Russians, along with their 2 armored personnel carriers in Mykilske. And just overall, in the last 24 hours in the east alone, Ukrainians were able to destroy 2 control points of Russians, 2 concentration of forces and 3 ammunition depots. Right here is the video from Mariupol, where according to locals, Russians are bringing a lot of military vehicles in Zaporozhye direction, and you probably can already guess why. And now let's quickly talk about the situation in the south, and our first stop brings us to Odessa, where recently some very loud noises have been reported. And apparently, as it turned out later, Russians destroyed a big warehouse of humanitarian support of Red Cross. Next we go to Jankoy, located on Crimean Peninsula, and some also very loud claps have been reported closer to the Russian airfield. As we go even more to the south, a couple of big bangs were heard in Sevastopol, and apparently later, according to Russians, they were able to intercept at least one of Ukrainian drones. But the most significant event of the last several days is that Russians ordered a mass evacuation from the south, from a lot of different settlements, such as, for example, according to this video located in Tokmak, the Russian soldiers are going apartment to apartment and they are urging the local residents to evacuate and take only the necessities. Then we have similar reports that Russians are forcing to voluntarily evacuate the local residents from Enerhodar, but they only take those which took the Russian passports, and then they relocate them to Primorsk and to Berdyansk. But one of the biggest waves of evacuations is happening right now from Melitopol, where local residents, as well as Russian infiltrators, they are trying to run away to Crimea. And most importantly, the Russian infiltrators, those allegedly Ukrainians who took the Russian passports, they start to throw away the Russian passports in case Ukrainians somewhere the checkpoints will check them and they don't want to be distinguished as Russians. But wait, there is more, because even from Kherson region, from cities such as Skadovsk, a lot of Russian infiltrators were spotted going towards Crimea. Right here you can see the map with all the reported cities from where this mandatory/voluntarily evacuation has been ordered, which pretty much gives you a good idea where the Russians expect the Ukrainian counteroffensive to begin. And so yes, the history repeats itself, because in the past, whenever Russians were announcing these mass evacuations, usually the next thing that followed was either the Ukrainian liberation or a goodwill gesture. And we can see exactly the same things happening right now. That is why it is no wonder that the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, also thinks that another goodwill gesture is coming. According to his own intelligence, the Kremlin is already looking for which territories to surrender and to justify this to Russian people as a necessary action, because Ukrainians will be otherwise very ruthless. Or maybe another popular explanation by the Russian authorities is that we had to give up this territory, but don't worry, we will capture it back in the future, because right now we will prioritize defending somewhere else. And at this very moment, I would personally assume 2 potential scenarios for the goodwill gesture, and both of them located in the south. And to be honest, Ukrainians, they do need to push Russians a little bit further to motivate them for this goodwill gesture, and one of the things that they can do is to separate the Crimean Peninsula from the rest of temporarily occupied Ukraine. And in this case, the first option of the goodwill gesture might happen on the left side of Dnipro River in the rest of Kherson region, or maybe in the best case scenario for Ukrainians, the second option is that Russians might actually surrender Melitopol. Right now, obviously, it is way early to tell, so these are all just my own personal assumptions, but if you think what other territories Russians might surrender, just please let us all know in the comments. But nevertheless, according to the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Vladimir Gavrilov, Ukrainian counterattack will be unexpected and Russians will panic. Because if you remember from my previous videos, one of the most crucial things about the upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive is to exactly do it so unexpectedly to make Russians run away in panic. And so pretty much yes, Russians are already living in this huge uncertainty. They are preparing to defend themselves without knowing where the actual concentration of Ukrainian counterattacks will arrive from. At the same time, they are now doing only thing which they have been doing successfully in the past, which is as always just targeting the civilian infrastructure of Ukrainians, hoping to break the spirit of these people. But in reality, the result is completely the opposite. It only makes Ukrainians to be even more angry, and their counteroffensive will be even more ruthless. They will liberate their territories. Good will always beat evil, and if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, just please subscribe to my channel. It only takes one click. The best way to support my work will be through my Patreon, where I unlock hundreds of uncensored footage every single week. You can also become my channel member, unlock exclusive channel badges and emojis, or you can simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.